Now, the most exciting news, at least for me, to come out of this year's Gamescom event wasn't even a new game. It was simply a better way to play them. Mere weeks after announcing their exciting partnership with Backbone to create a mobile phone controller based off of the styling of the PlayStation 5 DualSense,
Right.
Sony unveiled their ultimate game playing peripheral, the DualSense Edge. And to be fair, I am not one of those players who gets excited about every new controller on the market.
He really
But
isn't.
this one is actually a pretty big deal.
Now, why is this big news? One simple word: customization.
Okay, that's a simple word. So
Right
that's
there.
not really, I wasn't going to put it there
But
either.
now you have to customization.
I'm still not going to put it there.
Oh man,
Well, maybe I'll end up
Embarrassing.
putting it
That's
there.
embarrassing if you don't.
Just for you. So while Microsoft fans have been able to enjoy the benefits of a premium controller for several years, thanks to the fully customizable Elite controller, PlayStation, their players have been forced to stick with the official Sony controller or settle for some really rather dubious third-party controller options that tried and failed to mimic the impressive functionality of the Xbox Elite controller. But the days of undisputed controller supremacy are finally over. Sony has heard our cries, and they've answered with this beautiful piece of technology that will marry all of the fun enhancements that we like about the DualSense, like the haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers, with the customizable features of the Elite controller, like programmable buttons, replaceable back buttons, and stick caps.
It appears the controller playing field has finally been leveled, hopefully, and Sony has made and gained the edge. You see what I did there? Because it's called the Edge. And then I said, gain the edge.
Yeah, I see.
Clever.
I guess you think so. We'll let her have that one.
Come on, man.
While
Just let me have it.
I did. There it is. There, I'm going to put it right there. You have one.
One.
There you go.
Out of your...
The news that Sony has finally jumped into the big leagues with this new controller really is a big deal. For 7 long years, casual and competitive gamers have cried out for a controller that would match the capabilities of Xbox's Elite controller. And Sony's silence on that topic was really frustrating. They knew that we wanted it, and their competition had already proven that such a product was not only possible, but in exceptionally high demand.
But for years, we saw nothing from them. Nothing. As if they were just completely ignoring our outcry for something better, anything. And every time we asked for innovation, they simply gave us a new color variation of the same thing. What? So what changed? Why did Sony finally answer our requests for, you like blues that we said? I like purple.
I was just putting that in underneath, though. I wasn't going to have you point it out.
So why did Sony finally answer our requests for an alternative premium controller after all this time?
Of all the questions we can't answer, one we can answer. The capability to do this was always present. It was just a matter of it being the right time and the right place for it to happen.
According to Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Jim Ryan, Sony has been building and preparing the PS5 console for launch since 2015. The same year, Microsoft launched their Xbox Elite controller. Now, during that time, Sony was simultaneously creating and releasing content for their current console, which was the PS4, while also developing all of the technology that would define our current console generation, including the new PS5 DualSense controller.
And during that process, Sony had a pretty difficult decision to make. Would they choose to respond at that time to Microsoft's Elite controller on that current decaying PlayStation 4 platform, or would they wait for the right time and the right place for that to occur so it would have the impact they intended for it to have? Now sure, Sony could have thrown a bunch of money into making a premium PS4 controller that was like an Elite controller. And that expensive controller that was only designed for the present instead of the future would now be completely useless and obsolete for all of the gamers who have now upgraded to the new PlayStation 5 console. Time and place are just as important as power and potential, not just in the way we play our games, but in the way we play this game of life as well.
I see what you did there. Discovering our God-given dreams is a beautiful experience, bringing meaning, purpose and fulfillment into our lives, but the accomplishment of those dreams may not feel quite as beautiful. Bringing these labors of love to the place where they can shine can feel more like running through a war zone than a ballet dance.
It's like the opening scene from pretty much any Call of Duty game. We're just frantically running from place to place as explosions go off all around us, thick clouds of smoke obscuring our field of vision, and chaos reigning supreme. Now, sure, we started off with a plan and an objective, but now all we're trying to do is find a safe place to catch our breath and reevaluate. And all those grandiose thoughts of pursuing our God-given destiny can quickly disappear in the rearview mirror of a vehicle named necessity. And when we try to pick them back up again, it's easy to believe that we maybe missed our opportunity.
Perhaps we made some poor decisions, or the choices of others negatively impacted our path. Maybe we got caught up chasing our own dreams instead of His, or we had to wait for those souls who are destined to take this journey with us to be ready to join us. Whatever the reason is for us arriving at the place we're in now, there's one thing that all of these paths share in common.
The right dream still requires the right time and the right place for it to reach maximum effectiveness. We must take these gifts where they belong. The dreams and destinies that the Lord has placed in our hearts do not exist in a vacuum. These dreams are just one part of a huge collection of constantly shifting variables that are all flowing in a pattern that we don't have the ability to fully perceive. But that's because we can't see the full picture yet. We only see our part of the equation.
Similar to the DualSense Edge controller from Sony that seemingly came to us out of nowhere and long after we had given up, right? There is a larger plan in place that we're small but an important part of.
There's a time and a place for the gifts and the callings of the Lord to be discovered, and often a separate time and place for them to be fully unleashed, as Jesus Christ himself illustrated multiple times during his physical life down here with us. It happens in a time and place of the Father's choosing, not our own.
The DualSense Edge controller that Sony is finally delivering to us may have felt a lot more convenient on the PS4, several years ago. Almost a decade now. But Sony knew that providing a solution for that particular platform was a misguided use of time and resources.
We probably would have appreciated it at the time, but Sony was more interested in supporting the future than they were building the present that they were currently occupying. At the time that the Xbox Elite controller launched in 2015, the PlayStation 4 was still kind of in the middle of its life cycle. But Sony knew in that moment that where they were is not where they would be. And after this long, painful 7-year wait, we have finally received our first taste of what Sony has been cooking, at the right time and the right place for it to happen.
In our lives, we will often find that while the Lord has placed unique dreams and callings into each of our hearts, they still have a specific time as well as a particular place to be unlocked.
Sometimes it's a matter of timing. Abraham was still living at home when he was promised a distant land that would be given to his non-existent descendants. He was 75 years old at that time. He didn't have that son until he reached the ripe old age of 100. And other times, it's all about location. Paul was clearly called to be a missionary. But after trying to get there by multiple different paths, he was finally directed to the place he was specifically needed to perform his ministry.
When we don't align our efforts with his planning and provision, our best efforts will only lead to frustration, delays, and disappointment.
Abraham's attempt at fulfilling the dream that God placed in his heart in the time and place of his own choosing, instead of the Lord's, only ended in heartbreak and pain. If Sony had released their first ever premium controller that was on a console destined for decommissioning, they would have created, a complicated Ishmael situation of their own.
Instead, they patiently waited for the right time and the right place for this gift to launch the Edge. And it appears their patience as well as ours will finally be rewarded.
Just as Sony demonstrated when they finally announced their Edge controller, there's a specific time and place for the dreams that the Lord has given us to reach fruition.
We can't make them happen prematurely or in a different place than what His purposes call for. But once we have aligned our hearts and actions with His timing and position, we can march forward with confidence, knowing that the Lord who commissioned us will bring us to the outcome that He has promised.
Now, will it take longer than we prefer?
Probably.
Absolutely.
Probably.
It will. Trust me. It always does.
Always.
And will it happen in a place outside of our comfort zone? You can count on it.
Probably also.
His
Probably
ways
also.
are higher than our ways for a reason.
Yep.
It's because He sees beyond where we currently are to the place that He knows where we will be. And He places His dreams into our hearts so that when we pursue Him and His will with all of our heart, we will finally find the time and place where they become a reality.